Guys, it's me Astrid, and today I wanted to talk to you about growing orchids with the semi-hydroponic growing method because I'm finding that I really love it, and I'm finding that you guys have a lot of different confusions about it, and I realized I'm repeating myself a lot of times to explain the same thing, so I thought I would just consolidate it into a video so I can just send someone here to see what's up. I am by no means an expert in growing in the semi-hydroponic growing method. I've only been doing it a few months, but I find it to be spectacular, idiot-proof, stupid Astrid-proof. It's great. And I'm not the expert, but the expert is the man who came up with it, who's Ray Barkalow. He has a website called First Rays. I don't know the suffix on that, but it's first R-A-Y-S. And he came up with this about 20 years ago and has been growing orchids this way for 20 years. He sells semi-hydroponic media on his website, he sells orchid nutrients, he sells orchids, and he provides a lot of free information so people can know more about orchid growing from his perspective. And he provides a little science-based information as well because he is an engineer, and as a chemist, I really groove on that, so it jives well with me. And lastly, he has a webinar that is available on the AOS website, so if you're a member of the American Orchid Society, you can definitely access that and watch it and learn a lot of what he has to say in an hour-long presentation. Without further ado, let's talk about some things that I kind of put together. So growing semi-hydroponically, for those of you who are totally clueless, requires three things. One, a pot, probably a plastic pot, so you can custom put holes in it how you want. There needs to be about 2 to 3 holes about this far up from the bottom. So not too deep like this, not too shallow like this, but about like this. So that's like 3-4 centimeters, 1 to 1.5 inches. The second thing you need are your hydroton pellets or leca or clay sphere balls, whatever you want to call it, but there's that medium. It looks like Cocoa Puff cereal. And the third thing that you need to grow semi-hydroponically is your orchid. Which, I mean, how much simpler can you get? It's super, super easy. Let's talk about some of the confusions I've noticed people having. One is people are asking, are the roots going to go rotten? Are they going to get suffocated in the pot? And the quick answer is no. If you ever studied inorganic chemistry, you do the study of kind of atoms and you imagine them as a hard sphere. So this math is true all the way down to the atomic level, all the way up to like planet size level, like infinitely big and small. This is true, where if you have a hard sphere, just like the clay pellets used in semi-hydroponic, you can calculate how it's going to pack. And I think it's going to be the cubic closed packed arrangement for those of you who want to look that up. And with that arrangement, I've found on inorganic chemistry textbook and websites that it says there's 36% open space in that arrangement. And that is how the clay pellets arrange themselves. So if you have that much open space going through the pot all the time, and it's impossible to get closer than that because these are hard spheres, it's like the true idealization of the things we study in inorganic chemistry, then you find that there's going to be a lot of open air in there, which is going to keep your roots from suffocating. In the AOS webinar that Ray did on semi-hydroponic, he discussed that he thinks that because of this open air between the clay pellets and semi-hydroponic, you are able to allow those roots to have good gas exchange. So if a root starts to decay, those decaying gases don't get trapped around that root and suffocate it further. They get able to disperse back out into the atmosphere, and good air from the atmosphere is able to go back in. So it's a nice mix, and if you have good ventilation, then you should ideally be able to have good gas exchange and prevent that type of suffocating or rotting. The caveat there is that sometimes if you have too drastic a change for your roots, that you can have a root go from one environment that it grew in and adapted for, put it in the semi-hydroponic environment that is too different from whatever it was in before, and that root can die off, but only if it's too drastic a change. And some orchids, like Cattleyas, are way worse at this than other orchids like a Phalaenopsis in my experience. So there's that. But in the most case, I've noticed that the roots don't totally die off when you switch to semi-hydroponic, so that's my experience so far. Some people are like, oh, I want to mix in some sphagnum moss to keep the roots moist. No, you don't, because this whole hard sphere thing I was talking about with the open spaces between, if you get different sized pellets, the littler ones are going to fill in the spaces between the bigger ones. if you get sphagnum moss, the sphagnum moss is going to fill in that open space between the pellets as well as basically anything else. So if you want to really do the semi-hydroponic growing method, then you don't want to mix in differently sized particles into your mix. You only want to use the clay pellets. Don't mix stuff in, just use clay pellets, and use clay pellets that are of the same size or almost the same size. I have noticed also that the roots stay pretty moist anyway. I noticed on one pot, even though the pellets on the top of the pot were dry, the roots on the top of the pot were not dry. And Wade of Wade's Orchids suggested to me that this was because the roots themselves are able to do a wicking action. So if there's moisture lower down in the pot down here, but there's roots down here, the water is going to travel up those roots as well as the clay pellets. Even though they won't be wet on top, the roots can be wet on top. And I've seen that numerous times with my orchids. So there's that. And thank you, Wade, for that idea. I think it makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I've also had some people tell me that they want to do semi-hydroponic growing without the reservoir in the pot. And the reservoir is kind of key in growing semi-hydroponically, so if you decide to grow without the reservoir and you put regular holes in the pot, or you just grow in a pot with no holes at all, you're kind of defeating the functionality and the purpose of growing semi-hydroponically. Now, there's nothing wrong with using the leca pellets as a standard orchid growing medium. So if you wanted to treat the leca pellets like they were lava rock or something, that totally is fine. But you're not actually growing semi-hydroponically then, you're just growing like normal orchid growing. So there's that bit. But if you do it without the reservoir, you're defeating the purpose of the wicking action, you're defeating the purpose of the constant light, moisture, and good open air for your orchids, and so you're really changing up what's happening. And if you want to do semi-hydroponic, go all the way because it's great. Some people also say they grow semi-hydroponic in a glass vase. And my opinion on this is that it also kind of defeats the purpose, because if you have it in a glass vase, yes, that's very pretty, that's very beautiful, it's very nice, but unless you can put holes and drill holes so you have a little water reservoir at the bottom of the glass vase, I don't think it's going to work as well. Because when you water semi-hydroponically, you're flushing water through the pot very rapidly. And when you flush water through the pot very rapidly, you're washing out all the salts, you're washing out all the buildups that are possibly there, and providing fresh, clean water to the plant. If you're putting it in a vase and just turning the vase to the side and holding the beads in and then turning it back upright, leaving a little in the bottom, you're kind of getting the same thing, but I don't think you're going to get as effective as a flushing of your pot as you will get if you have a plastic pot that has holes drilled in the bottom. But that's my opinion, and you're free to do whatever you want, and if that's growing really well for you, then by all means, please keep growing that way. I'm not here to change your life or anything. Other people say, oh, I can't grow this orchid in it, can I? I can't grow the species orchid I have or a path in it, can I? Yes, you can. There is a list on Orchid Board, which I'm going to link below, of all these different kinds of orchids that people have grown in the semi-hydroponic growing method with success. And it ranges from dendrobiums to cattleyas to species, paphiopedilums and phragmipediums, and hybrid paphiopedilums and phragmipediums, phalaenopsis, vandaceous type orchids. Basically, all kinds of orchids that I can think of are on that list, and that is by no means an exhaustive list because not everyone hops on Orchid Board to write out every single orchid they've had success growing in the semi-hydroponic growing method. All my plants in semi-hydroponic are doing really well unless they were sick in the first place. And then some people seem to be kind of confused about fertilizing in semi-hydroponic. And that's a really easy answer. All you do is you pre-mix your water and your fertilizer, stir it up, and then pour it through your pot with a cup, and that does the trick. So fertilizing is pretty easy in the semi-hydroponic growing method. And if you want your orchid to soak in semi-hydroponic, you can just get a pot like this, I have pots everywhere, and put the other pot right into it and soak it if you want to make it absorb like some root stimulating hormone or something, but otherwise just flush through and the pot does the job itself of wicking up water and keeping the roots moist and so on. Also, if you're worried about your orchid establishing itself while in semi-hydroponic, you can just use a root stimulating hormone. I use Super Thrive, and it seems to really make the plant kick out some roots really fast and jump into growing in that medium, and that's a really good thing. I wanted to move on to some pros and cons of growing in semi-hydroponics. The pros first. that watering is really, really easy. And supposedly it is impossible to overwater the orchid because of that open space in the pot and because of that easy gas exchange with the root and the surroundings. Repotting is stupid easy with semi-hydroponics. Like, if you're putting a plant for the first time into semi-hydroponic, literally like pot, put holes in it, and then hold your plant and like dump the pellets around the roots, massage it in a little bit, shake it a little bit so it's sturdy, and you're good. Like, it's that easy. It is very, very easy. For a plant that has been well established in semi-hydroponic, you don't have to ever repot unless the orchid gets too big for its pot. So all you have to do is pull the orchid out of the pot. It will probably hold on to all the pellets, put it in a bigger pot, and pour new pellets around the sides. And that's all. Like, another pro about semi-hydroponic growing is that the pots are very well weighted down. If you have a top-heavy orchid, if you have a phal that likes to make giant flower spikes that are heavy and tips your plant over, if you're growing large den phals like I am, this will keep the pot down. It won't tip over anymore, and that is like a godsend. It is the best. And lastly, I just wanted to talk about some of the cons of growing in semi-hydroponic. Putting a stake in the pot is like, just doesn't work right. Like, you put a stake in the pot, and unless it's a really tall pot and a really tall stake, it will like move around every time you water it because the pellets float up a little bit and then everything resettles back down as the water drains out, and that means the stake will, like, the pellets all float up and get loose, so the stake turns and then they settle back down, and then you have a stake like this, and then it does it again, and I have crooked stakes all over the place, and it's very annoying. But the solution to this is using a rhizome clip, which is where I drill through either side of the pot and put a thin wire over it and curve it over the rhizome of a plant, and that holds it steady, and that helps the stake hold steady. And another solution is to tape your stake to the outside of the pot. That seems to work very well too. Algae growth is a huge problem in semi-hydroponic for some people. For other people like me who don't give a crap about algae in their pots, like, doesn't matter at all. Proposed correction or suggestion to fix this has been to put your clear pot inside of an opaque decorative pot. And it doesn't matter because the airflow comes from the top of the pot, not the sides, so you don't have to worry about the ventilation on the sides, and that might deprive it of sunlight and the food it needs to grow. And there are other kind of solutions, but I don't really know about them. And the last thing is that it hurts like a bitch to step on a clay pellet. Like, it hurts so bad, and they get everywhere. And if you step on one of these clay pellets, it hurts 10 times as bad as stepping on bark because it's just this little hard sphere, and you're like, oh! I hope this has cleared up a lot of the confusion about growing semi-hydroponically. I really, really recommend this method. I love it. I'm going to switch all my orchids to it except my mounts because I think it's that good. That includes my PAFs, my species orchids, my Catasetinae at some point, and yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you so much. If you have questions, please try to contact me or Ray Barkalow or other people. Go on message boards. There's lots of places where you can learn more about semi-hydroponic from people who know even more about it than I do and who can adequately answer your questions. Thank you. Have a nice day and happy growing. Bye, guys.